So in our last video, we made this Pythagorean cup. While I was reading up on it on Wikipedia, I noticed this puzzle jug in the related links, and I thought, hey, that sounds way easier than coming up with a new idea for a lesson. From what I understand from Wikipedia, these were part of a weird kind of bar game that people played in the 18th and 19th century, where they would challenge a contestant to drink from a jug without spilling. The catch, of course, is that the neck of this jug is full of holes, so if you try to pour in any direction, it's just going to spill all the hell over the place. The secret is that there's this hollow channel hidden in the spout that travels down the handle and can be used as a drinking straw, albeit a drinking straw that can never be removed or adequately cleaned. The contestant could just place their mouth over the spout and suck the liquor and anything else that had congealed in the jug over the years through the straw. This sounds pretty strange to a modern audience, but what you have to remember is that back in those days, people just absolutely loved catching oral herpes. Like, today the government censors it because they don't want people to know the truth, but back then, literally every single TV show was just like a sitcom in which the main characters constantly tried to catch oral herpes, only to be thwarted at the last moment so that everything can go back to normal for the next episode. Of course, a challenge like this can't really last for too long before people learn the trick, so some tavern owners would also drill holes in the handle that a contestant would have to plug with their finger in order to drink. Which is probably a good idea, because otherwise it's not really a puzzle jug so much as just like a jug with a really bad idea for a built-in straw. So yeah, that's what it is, and today we're going to make one. We're going to start by creating a sketch on the front plane named Jug Profile. If you've been following these lessons, this should feel pretty familiar by now, and I apologize for that. I promise I'll mix things up a bit with the next video. Sketch out a rough profile of what you want your jug to look like. I'm going with a circle on top of a rectangle, but really yours can look like whatever. Do make sure that you give it a decently long neck though, as we are going to need to poke a bunch of holes through that. Cut it in half with a vertical line and use the scissors to snip away any internal lines. We're going to be revolving this out when we're done, so you only have to do one half of it. Round out any sharp corners with a fillet tool. I mean, unless you want sharp corners, like, you don't have to do this, I'm just doing it because I think it looks nice. Hollow it out with the offset tool. Make the offset whatever you want your wall thickness to be. Draw a circle centered at the top of the neck to create the lip. Remember that we are going to have to hide a straw in this, so make it big enough to do that. Make a quick note of the diameter of the circle you just sketched and how far away it is from the center. An easy way to get this is to use the sketch dimension tool and just hit enter without plugging anything in. We're going to need this information later. Now that we have the circle interrupting things, take the scissors and snip away the top. I'm also going to clean up some internal lines as well. You don't really have to do this, but I think it makes it easier to visually understand what's going on. Finish up the sketch and revolve it out. We now have a perfectly good jug, so let's go ruin it by punching a bunch of holes in its neck. Create a new sketch on the front plane and name it Neck Hole. It's going to be a lot easier to sketch this out if we don't have this jug flashing in our face while we're doing it, so here's how we're going to handle that. Start by sketching a vertical line on the neck which covers the approximate area you want to work on. Then once you have that, click the little eyeball icon next to bodies. This will make all bodies invisible, so we won't have this jug in our face while we work. Sketch out some kind of a decorative design that you can use for a hole. Yours does not need to look anything like mine, but if you are planning to 3D print your results, then make sure that you are mindful of any unsupported overhangs. I want mine to be symmetric, so I'm only going to sketch out half of it, and then I'm just going to use the mirror tool to create the other half. The mirror tool does pretty much exactly what you would expect. It creates a mirror image of whatever. To use it, select the tool, select the stuff that you want to mirror, and then select the line that you want to mirror that stuff across. Once you have your design the way you like it, finish up the sketch, click the eyeballs next to bodies to unhide everything, and use the Extrude tool to poke your sketch through. Next we need to take this hole and copy it all the way around the neck of the jug. For this we'll use a circular pattern. Circular patterns take a part of your design and rotate them around in a circle. To use this tool, first select it from the Pattern submenu in the Create menu, then tell it what you want copied and what axis you want it copied around. Note that there is also a two-dimensional version of this tool that you can use for your sketches, and it works pretty much the same way. Create a circular pattern, click the extrusion we just created in the history at the bottom of the screen, and then use any part of the jug for the axis. Play around with the quantity until it looks good to your eye, and then hit OK. Congratulations! We've now ruined our jug with a bunch of stupid holes. Next we'll fix it with a super unsanitary built-in straw that cannot be removed or cleaned in any way. We'll sketch the path for the handle first. Create a new sketch on the front plane and name it Handle Path. Grab the line tool and sketch a short vertical line close to the side of the jug. We want to start this as a straight line just because it's going to make things a little bit easier down the road. Switch to the bendy line tool to draw the rest of the handle. We need this handle to terminate exactly in the middle of the lip, or else we're going to end up with it poking out a bit. There's a few ways that we can handle this situation, but here's the one that I find the easiest. Sketch a circle at the end of the bendy line that's the exact same diameter as the circle that you used to create the lip. Once you have your circle, drag it until it snaps into place. You can now delete the circle. Take a minute to tidy up your path. I'm giving mine a steep bend at the top because that's going to make it easier to print. Now, if you're not planning to print your jug, or you just aren't as pathologically opposed to using support material as I am, then you don't really need to make it this steep. Finish up the sketch when you're done. Next, we'll sketch the shape for our sweep. Create a new sketch on the bottom of the jug and name it Handle Shape. We're going to keep this one pretty simple. Using the path we just drew as a center point, sketch a 6mm circle, then sketch a circle around it with the same diameter as the circle you used to create the jug lip. Finish the sketch when you're done. For our first sweep, use just the outer ring as the profile. This is going to create a hollow handle, but it's not hollow all the way through, as this does not remove material from where the handle intersects the jug and the lip. We can fix this with another sweep, but you'll notice that our sketches are now hidden, which happens normally whenever a sketch is used to build something for the first time. To fix this, click the eyeballs next to Handle Path and Handle Shape to unhide them. Once you can see them again, create another sweep using the inside circle as your profile. Our handle is now hollow, but it extends all the way out of the bottom of our piece. Let's fix that. Extrude the inner circle up by whatever your wall thickness is. Next, we'll cut a hole into the bottom of the straw so that fluid can get into it. This is going to be easier if we switch to X-ray mode, so click Display Settings, then Visual Style, then Wireframe. Create a new sketch on the side plane named Lower Straw Hole. This one's going to be pretty simple. Sketch a 6mm circle and use the Sketch Dimension tool to put it 3mm above the floor of the jug. Finish up the sketch and extrude the circle until it's poking halfway through the straw. Next, we're going to poke a hole closer to the top of the handle so that we can at least pretend this is a puzzle, but we're going to run into a little snag here. We don't have a flat surface to sketch on in the area that we want to do the sketching, and if we sketch on the front plane, the hole is going to poke through the entire jug instead of just the handle. To fix this, we'll create an offset plane. The offset plane tool allows you to create a new plane which you can build sketches on that is parallel to an existing surface. To use it, select the tool, click the surface that you want to make the new plane parallel to, and drag your new plane to where you want it. Click the offset plane tool and then click the front plane. Drag the new plane back so that it is between the handle and the jug, and then hit enter to create it. Now you might have noticed that when we did that, a new folder named Construction popped up in our browser, and if we open it up, we can see the plane that we just created is in there. Like sketches, it's a good idea to get into the habit of renaming planes so that you know what they are. Let's name this one Between Jug and Handle. Now that we have something to draw on, create a sketch on the plane that we just drew and name it Upper Straw Hole. This is going to be another simple one. Sketch a small circle, finish the sketch, and extrude it halfway through the straw. Our handle is good to go, so let's give it back its skin. Click Display Settings at the bottom of the screen, then Visual Style, then Shaded. Up next, we'll use the Loft tool to create the spout. The Loft tool lets you connect two or more two-dimensional shapes into a three-dimensional shape. Think of it kind of like a fancy extrude that starts out as one shape but then transforms into a different one. To use this tool, simply select it and feed it the profiles you want to use to create your loft. We'll create the bottom of the spout first. Use the offset plane tool on the top plane and drag the new plane up until it's right in the middle of the jug's lip, and then hit enter to create it. Name it Lip Middle. Create a sketch on the plane we just created and name it Spout Bottom. So the bottom of our spout is basically just going to be the left side of the lip. To accomplish that, we're going to draw two circles, one that lines up with the outside of the lip and one that lines up with the inside. Draw a third circle to the left that cuts through our circles, and use the scissors to clean everything up. Finish the sketch when you are done. Time to make the top of the spout, which we're going to do pretty similar to how we made the bottom. Create another plane that is about 25 millimeters above the lip, then create a sketch on that plane. Draw another pair of circles, but this time a little bit off to the left and a little bit smaller. Make sure there is a decent sized gap between them though, as we are going to need to sneak a straw through this. Use another circle to cut off the part we need, tidy things up with the scissors, and finish the sketch. Select Loft from the Create menu and feed it the two shapes we just drew. Let's use the three-dimensional fillet tool to round out the edges. This works exactly the same as the two-dimensional tool, except it's three-dimensional. Now that we have our spout, we can create our straw. Create a new sketch on the same plane that we used for the bottom part of the spout and name it Upper Straw Path. Remember how back at the beginning of this video I told you to make a note of how far the circle we used to create the lip was from the center? Sketch a circle with a diameter that is twice that number right in the middle of the jug. If you did it right, the circle should go right through the middle of the lip. Grab the line tool and draw a short horizontal line to break up the right side of the circle, just slightly above where the handle intersects it. So here's where it's going to get a little tricky. We want our path to go up the spout, but that's not on the plane that we're sketching on. We could always just hollow out the part that is on our plane and then create another drawing to take care of the rest, but I'm going to show you a simpler way to handle this. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that 3D Sketch is checked off in our sketch palette. This is going to allow us to draw stuff outside of the plane we created the sketch on. Next, we're going to use the line tool to start a new line on the far left side of the circle. Swing the camera around so that you're looking at the sketch from the side. Drag this little round thingy until the red line is going straight through the spout. Twist the camera around a bit so that you can see the inside of the spout, and then click somewhere along the red line but above the spout to finish the line that we started. Now grab the scissors and cut away the excess. This completes our path, so go ahead and hit Finish Sketch. Just like before, our shape is going to be a lot simpler. Create a new sketch on the front plane and draw a 6mm circle using the edge of the path we just drew as a center point. Finish up the sketch when you're done. Create the sweep to complete our straw. Congratulations, our puzzle jug now technically works, but there is one more step before it's complete. So Wikipedia claims that puzzle jugs were often decorated with an inscription, and while I don't deny that there is some decorative quality to that, I think the inscription is actually a little bit more important. Consider the following scenario. Say in a few hundred years, some future archaeologist is digging around the remains of my apartment in order to find out what destroyed my civilization. Now say they find this puzzle jug, but I have not put an inscription on it. The archaeologist is going to see all the holes around the neck of the jug, which make it completely worthless as a jug, and will almost certainly conclude that my civilization failed because our drinkware manufacturers were just that incompetent. After all, how are you going to have a civilization when you can't even drink without spilling all over yourself like some kind of a slob? Now let's change things up a bit and assume that I've put some kind of an inscription on the jug to let everyone know that it's actually supposed to be this way. In this scenario, things are completely different. Now the archaeologist will assume that our civilization failed because when we had an opportunity to do something about climate change, systemic racism, wealth inequality, and all the other things that we know are going to blow up in our collective faces, we instead made stupid trick jugs to drink out of. Now, granted, this isn't much more dignified than thinking that we just didn't know how to make drinkware, but I mean it is at least accurate. Create a new sketch on the top plane and name it Inscription. Sketch a circle that is roughly 65 millimeters in diameter to serve as a path for our text. I say roughly because you might have to tweak this later depending on what you choose for your inscription and font, but 65 should be a good jumping off point. The text tool lets you add text to a sketch. You can pick the font, size, and style of the text. To use it in block mode, make sure that text is selected for type, which is the default behavior. Use 2 clicks to define the rectangle that will hold your text and start typing. To use it in path mode, make sure that text on path is selected for type, select the path that you want the text to go along, and then start typing. Next, we'll use the Text tool to create the inscription. Select the Text tool under the Create menu. Click on Text on Path, and then select the circle we just drew. Type in what you want for your inscription. I'm going with "Come and drink your fill, but do not spill," which in this context is really just a way for me to say I meant to do that, but also it rhymes. Now, you'll notice that there is actually a slight glitch in Fusion in that by default it is going to use Arial for the font. Now, if you happen to be an extremely boring person whose ideas can be safely ignored because of how aggressively dull they are, then this is probably fine for you and you should stick with Arial because, I mean, it is your font after all. For the rest of us, I would recommend switching to Comic Sans. You can technically use whatever font you want, but just be aware that if it's not Comic Sans, then it's wrong and you're just going to have to accept that. Next, set the size. There's not really a great trick to this. Basically, you just want to guess something and tweak it until it looks right. Once it does, hit OK to create the text. Create a new extrude and feed it the text we just created. Now, if we just extrude this normally, it'll cut the text into the bottom of the jug, and that could work, but it would make it really easy for future archaeologists to miss it, and I really don't want to risk that. Instead, I want to put the text on top of the jug, and here's how we're going to accomplish that. If you take a look at the extrude window, you'll notice that our start point is the profile plane, which means that the text will start extruding from the plane it was drawn on, just like it always has in the past. Click the drop down and change profile plane to object, which tells Fusion that we want to instead start the extrusion from the surface of an object. Click the top of the jug to select it as the object and set the extrusion to 1 millimeter. Now, you'll probably notice that your computer freezes up a bit when you do this, and it may take it a decent amount of time to recover. This is actually normal and is just because there's a ton of math involved in projecting text onto a surface that curves in 2 different dimensions. Give it some time and your machine should eventually figure it out. Once the extrusion appears, spin the jug around to make sure that you're not missing any letters. Fusion does this obnoxious thing where if it's unable to create any single part of a letter, it won't create the letter at all. So if your text extends too far in either direction, it may actually end up dropping letters. If that does happen, edit the inscription sketch and play around with the size of the circle. You might also want to try changing your font to Comic Sans if it isn't already. Comic Sans is actually just as prone to this issue as any other font, but it is an objectively better font than whatever you chose, so you know. Assuming all of your letters came out, the jug is now good to go. Let's send it to the printer and see what it looks like in real life. And here's our completed jug in real life. I did test it and it works, though I'm not sure if that really matters as it's not like it's going to see a lot of use as a drinking vessel. I am pretty happy with how it came out though. If you're wondering about the letters, what I did here is I just took a black permanent marker to them, which is super easy to do with them slightly raised. This is a great way to add small amounts of color without having to spring for a dual extruder. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe, because if you don't, then you're just an awful person, and I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I mean, it is what it is.